She folded her napkin into a triangle. It was Christmas Eve. We were all sitting around the dining room table, my wife, my daughter, her fiancé, and me. My sister had driven up from Richmond with her husband. The house smelled like pine and pot roast. Christmas music was playing low in the background. Everything looked exactly the way Christmas is supposed to look. And then I saw it. My daughter picked up her cloth napkin, smoothed it flat on the table in front of her, and folded it corner to corner into a neat triangle. Then she set it down beside her plate and looked at me for exactly 1 second before looking away. I stopped cutting my food. I didn't say anything. I picked up my glass of water and took a slow sip and looked at the centerpiece my wife had spent 2 days putting together. Candles and holly and little gold pine cones. I looked at that centerpiece for a long time. That fold, that exact fold, I hadn't seen it in 11 years. Her name is Abby. She's 31 now. When she was a little girl, maybe 9 or 10, we used to go to her school concerts together. Just the two of us, because her mum worked Thursday evenings and the concerts were always on Thursdays. We'd sit in the back so we could talk quietly without bothering anyone. And she'd get nervous waiting for her part, and I'd squeeze her hand and she'd squeeze back. One night, maybe when she was 12, she told me she didn't want to go back to a sleepover at her friend's house. She didn't say why, not right there in the car, but I could tell something had happened. She was too quiet. Her hands were folded in her lap in a triangle. Thumbs touching, fingers spread, like a little tent. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "I don't know how to say it with everybody listening." Nobody was listening. It was just us in the car. But I understood what she meant. She needed a way to tell me that didn't feel like announcing it. So we made a signal. If she was ever somewhere, she couldn't just say the words. If something was wrong and she needed me to pull her out, no questions asked, no scene. She'd fold whatever was in her hands into a triangle. A piece of paper. A napkin. Her sleeves if nothing else was available. And I'd know. I'd find a way to get her alone. We used it maybe 6 or 7 times when she was a teenager. Once at a party when she needed a ride but didn't want to look like the kid calling her dad. Once at Thanksgiving with my brother's family when one of his college friends was making her uncomfortable. Once when she was 17 and we were at a family dinner and she'd had a glass of wine she shouldn't have had and needed me to cover for her without her mother finding out. Small things mostly, but the signal always worked. I always came. By the time she went to college, we didn't need it anymore. She was grown. She could handle her own exits, make her own calls. The signal just quietly retired. I'd almost forgotten about it. Until Christmas Eve. Her fiancé's name is Preston. They'd been together about 2 years when he proposed, and I'll be honest, I liked him well enough in the beginning. He was charming in that easy way some men are, where everything seems effortless, good-looking, well-dressed, talked about his work with a lot of confidence. He was in financial consulting, which could mean 100 different things, but he talked about it the way people do when they want you to be impressed without asking too many follow-up questions. My wife loved him. My sister thought he was wonderful. He always remembered little details. What kind of wine my wife preferred, that my sister had a bad knee and brought her a chair before she asked. He sent me a bottle of Kentucky bourbon on my birthday with a handwritten note. That kind of man. Abby seemed happy. That was what mattered most to me. She smiled more. She stopped stress calling me on Sunday nights the way she used to in her late 20s. She seemed settled. They got engaged in October, a year before that Christmas. A destination proposal in Colorado, hiking trail, mountain view, the whole thing. She called me from the trail, still crying, and I told her I was happy for her. I meant it. But something shifted after the engagement, slowly, the way seasons shift. You don't notice until you're already in the middle of it. She started calling less. When she did call, she sounded rehearsed somehow, like she was sticking to safe topics, the wedding plans, the venue, the dress. When I asked how work was going, she's a physical therapist, runs her own small practice. She'd give me short answers. Fine, Dad. Busy. She'd never been like that with me before. I noticed it, but I told myself it was the engagement. Planning a wedding is stressful. She was busy. I didn't push. Then in November, about a month before Christmas, my wife mentioned something offhand. Abby had asked her about cashing out a 401k early. Just asking, she said. Curious about the penalties. I asked my wife what context Abby brought it up in. She didn't know, just that Abby had seemed interested in the mechanics of it. The taxes, the early withdrawal fees, whether there were exceptions. I filed that away. Preston arrived at our house Christmas Eve, around 4 o'clock. He had gifts for everyone, wrapped in actual paper with ribbon, not gift bags. He helped carry things in from the car. He complimented my wife's roast before he'd even tasted it. He asked my sister's husband about the drive down and whether traffic had been bad on 95. Dinner was good, warm. My sister's youngest called in on FaceTime from Portland, and we passed the phone around the table. We talked about the wedding venue, a farmhouse property about an hour outside of Charlottesville, already booked for June. We talked about my wife's book club and my brother-in-law's retirement timeline. Preston talked about a new investment vehicle he was excited about, something he was advising a few clients on. He didn't get into specifics, just said it was performing really well and that his clients were extremely satisfied. He laughed a little when he said it. Easy confidence. And then my daughter folded her napkin into a triangle. I excused myself after dinner to get more wood for the fireplace. We didn't need more wood. I just needed a reason to go outside. I was on the back porch, in the cold, when the back door opened and Abby came out. She'd grabbed her coat off the hook by the door. She pulled it tight around herself and stood next to me and didn't say anything for a moment. I waited. I didn't know if you'd remember, she said. I remembered. She nodded. She looked out at the yard, my wife's garden, brown now, the bird feeder covered in a light frost. I need to tell you something, she said. But I need you to not react. Not yet. Not until I finish. Okay. She was quiet another moment. Then she said, Preston has been asking me to move money. I kept looking at the garden. How much? I asked. A lot, she said. Over the last 4 months. A little at a time. Into what? She exhaled. Her breath made a small cloud. He says it's a private equity fund, something he's managing for a small group of clients. He says the returns are guaranteed, 15–18% annually. He says his clients have been in it for 2 years and nobody's had any problems. I didn't say anything. He has paperwork, she said. It looks real. There's a prospectus and everything. There's a company name. I looked it up online and there's a website. How much have you moved so far? I asked. She was quiet for a beat. 42,000, she said. I kept my face still. I had promised her I wouldn't react. From your practice account? I asked. My practice account. And I cashed out part of my 401k. She paused. I know. How long have you been uncomfortable? Since October, she said. Right around when he first brought it up. But he had an answer for everything. Every question I asked, he had an answer, and everything looked legitimate. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. What changed? She pulled her coat tighter. Last week, I was on his laptop. He asked me to print something. I wasn't snooping. And I saw a folder on his desktop. It had a name I recognized. One of the clients he'd told me about. Someone who was supposedly making great returns. I clicked on it by accident. She stopped. What was in it? I said. A spreadsheet, she said. It had names and amounts, and some of the amounts in the column labeled disbursed were the same as the amounts in the column labeled received, like exactly the same, to the dollar. The dates were about 45 days apart. I knew exactly what that was. I didn't say so yet. He came in before I could look at it longer, she said. I closed it fast. I don't think he saw, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Has he asked for more money recently? I asked. Last week, she said. He said there's a new round opening in January. He wants me to put in another 30,000. He said this is the last opportunity for early investors to get in at the founding rate. She shook her head. That's what he said. Founding rate. I nodded slowly. Abby, I said, Do you remember what I told you when you were 16 and that kid tried to sell you and your friend's concert tickets through some guy he knew? She almost laughed, small and sad. You said if someone's creating urgency around money, walk away. If someone's creating urgency around money, I said, walk away. She was quiet. What you described in that spreadsheet, I said. The money coming in and going out in equal amounts with a lag between them. That's not an investment return. That's one person's money being used to pay another person's promised return. It only works as long as new money keeps coming in. She closed her eyes. It has a name, I said. It's called a Ponzi scheme. We stood on that porch for a long time. The temperature dropped. Inside, through the window, I could see Preston helping my wife clear the table, laughing at something my brother-in-law said. The picture of ease. I asked her what she wanted to do. She said she didn't know. She said she was afraid. Not just of losing the money, though that too, but of what it meant. Of who Preston actually was underneath the bourbon gifts and the good manners and the ribbon-wrapped presents. I keep thinking about the proposal, she said. Colorado, the whole thing. Was any of it real? I didn't have an answer to that. What I told her was this: the most important thing right now was not to let him know she knew. Don't confront him. Don't ask more questions about the investment. Don't show any change in behavior. She needed to act normal through the rest of Christmas, through the night, through breakfast tomorrow. And first thing after the holidays, she needed to call a securities attorney, not a regular lawyer, specifically someone who handled investment fraud. What about the money? She asked. The $42,000. We'll figure it out, I said. That's not the first problem. The first problem is making sure you don't lose more, and making sure there's a paper trail before he has any reason to move anything. She asked if she could have the money back. I told her honestly that I didn't know. In some Ponzi cases, there are recoveries when the scheme collapses and assets get seized. Sometimes. Not always. Not usually the full amount. But there are options, and an attorney would know them better than I did. She nodded. She wiped her eyes fast, the way she used to do when she was little, and didn't want anyone to see she'd been crying. I'm sorry, she said. I should have said something sooner. You said something, I told her. You folded a napkin. We went back inside. Dessert was my wife's pecan pie and the good coffee. Preston poured cups for everyone and asked my brother-in-law a question about golf, and the conversation picked up again like nothing had happened. I sat across from him and watched him. He was good. I'll give him that. He was very, very good. The warmth was perfectly calibrated. The questions were perfectly remembered. He never oversold himself. That was the clever part. He didn't brag. He just existed with a low hum of competence that made you want to believe him. I thought about the bourbon he'd sent on my birthday. I thought about the fact that he probably expensed it somehow. Or maybe it had come from money that wasn't his to spend. I drank my coffee and smiled when the moment called for it and said nothing. The day after Christmas, Abby called me from her car, parked down the street from her apartment. She'd woken up early, before Preston, and driven around for a while. I gave her the name of an attorney, a friend of a friend, a woman who'd spent 15 years in the SEC's enforcement division before going into private practice. I told Abby to call her that morning, that day, before the holiday week made everyone unavailable. She called me back 3 hours later. The attorney had heard enough to take the case immediately. She asked Abby to send everything she had, the paperwork Preston had given her, screenshots of the spreadsheet she'd glimpsed on his laptop, bank transfer records showing the amounts she'd moved. The attorney also told her something I hadn't known. She wasn't the only one. There'd been a complaint filed with FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, 4 months earlier, from another investor. The complaint was pending review. Preston's name was on it. When Abby told me that, I had to sit down. 4 months earlier, right around October, right around when he'd first started asking her to move money. He had known there was a complaint coming, and he had turned to his fiancée. I'm going to skip the middle part because it's long and ugly and involves lawyers and documents and a lot of phone calls I don't want to relive in detail. Here's what matters. The engagement ended in January. Abby ended it. She sat him down and told him she knew, and she told him she'd already talked to an attorney, and she told him she would not be making any further investments and would be pursuing recovery of the funds already transferred. He denied everything. Then he got angry. Then he got quiet in a way that was worse than the anger. Then he left. The Finray investigation expanded. 2 other investors came forward. There was a civil suit filed in March. By the time spring arrived, Preston's consulting practice had been shuttered, and his assets were frozen pending the outcome of proceedings. Abby recovered about 60% of her money. Not all of it, but more than I'd expected. She cried when the first check came through. Not from relief exactly. More like something she'd been holding finally letting go. She's doing well now. Her practice is busy. She added a second therapist over the summer, which she'd been wanting to do for 2 years. She's not seeing anyone new, and she's not in a hurry to. She calls me on Sunday evenings again, the way she used to. Last month, she came home for a long weekend and we sat on the back porch, the same porch, and drank coffee and watched the birds at the feeder. She said, "I kept thinking I should have known. The signs were there." I told her that's how it works. The people who do this for a living are professionals at making it not feel like a warning sign. They study the human desire to trust the people we love. They're counting on it. It's not a character flaw to have believed him. It's exactly what he was designed to make you do. "How did you know?" she asked. "When I folded the napkin, you knew right away." "I raised you," I said. "I was paying attention." She was quiet a moment. Then she said, "I almost didn't do it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I almost just went home that night and let it go." "But you didn't," I said. "No," she said, "I didn't." I picked up my coffee cup. She picked up hers. "The signal," she said. "We should keep it for whatever comes next." I told her we'd keep it as long as she wanted. What I didn't say, what I'm saying now to anyone listening, is that the signal was never really about a folded napkin. It was about 11 years of knowing that whatever she needed to tell me, I would stop everything to hear it. That's what she was actually using on Christmas Eve. Not a code, a lifetime of trust. The napkin was just how she remembered to use it. I still think about that Christmas Eve table. The candles. The holly centerpiece my wife spent 2 days putting together. Preston pouring coffee for everyone, laughing at something my brother-in-law said, and Abby right across from me, folding a napkin into a triangle with hands that were probably shaking just enough that no one else noticed. What strikes me now is not that Preston deceived her. People like him exist, and they are very good at what they do, and no amount of intelligence fully protects you from someone who has spent years studying how trust works and how to wear it like a costume. What strikes me is that Abby knew, somewhere underneath all the doubt and the second-guessing and the voice that kept saying, "You're probably just being paranoid," she knew, and she found a way to say so anyway. That took something. It takes a particular kind of honesty to admit, even silently, even with just a folded napkin, that the person you love might be lying to you. Most of us will do almost anything to avoid that admission. We'll explain away the spreadsheet we accidentally saw. We'll tell ourselves the founding rate offer is just how finance people talk. We'll decide we're not qualified to have suspicions about someone who seems so sure of himself. Abby did all of that too for months. But in the end, she didn't let it be the final word. That's what I keep coming back to when I think about what she actually did right. Not that she was suspicious. Being suspicious is easy. What's hard is acting on it when the cost of being wrong feels enormous. When the relationship is on the line, when the holiday table is full and everyone is laughing, and it would be so much simpler to just let Christmas happen and deal with it in January. She did it anyway. She folded the napkin and she came out to the porch in the cold, and she told me the truth, even before she fully believed it herself. I raised her to do that. Not by lecturing her about honesty. I don't think I ever sat her down and delivered a speech about integrity. I raised her to do it by showing up every time she signaled that she needed me to. 11 years of that. 11 years of dropping whatever I was doing and finding a way to hear her. What you build over 11 years of showing up is the belief that telling the truth to someone is safe, that it won't cost you more than staying quiet. That belief saved her $42,000. More than that, it saved her from marrying a man who would have kept taking as long as she kept giving. The money she recovered, most of it matters. I won't pretend otherwise. But the thing that matters more is what she did with the information once she had it. She hired an attorney. She documented everything. She sat across from Preston and told him what she knew and what she'd already put in motion, and she did not flinch. That kind of steadiness doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from knowing in your bones that you made the right call and being willing to follow it all the way through, even when it's hard and expensive and lonely. She's okay now. Better than okay. She added another therapist to her practice. She calls on Sunday evenings. Last month she came home and we sat on the porch and watched the birds, and she said she almost didn't fold the napkin. Almost. But she did. And that's the whole story, really. Not what Preston did. What Abby did. What she chose, in one quiet moment at a Christmas table, when it would have been so easy to choose differently.